Hi, I'm Dr. Phil Parker, and today I'm going to be talking about functional neurological disorder, or FND. It's a fascinating and difficult condition which has a checkered history. Particularly around the time of Freud, it had a different name. It was called conversion disorder or conversion issue. And by that, what he meant was there was some kind of conflict within the psychology of a person, and that resulted in creation of symptoms. And from that, it kind of led into the idea that FND, or conversion disorders, was somehow all about your emotions, all about, repressed ego conflicts. And when we need to part that conversation because things have moved on a lot. So functional neurological disorder fundamentally looks like someone has a really significant neurological issue like Parkinson's or MS. The symptoms can be identical, and epilepsy is a very common one. It is the cause of huge amounts of people seeking neurological consults. So it's the second most common one. Headaches is number one. The problem with functional neurological disorders from a diagnostic point of view is that when you scan people, you can't find anything. So there's nothing physical to see on the traditional kind of diagnostic scans that one would do. This then naturally led to the idea, well, these people are making it up, that it's just in their mind. And for a long time, people with functional FND were thrown into the basket of people who've got mental health issues because nothing could be found. There's been a real rethink about this recently. The first kind of major rethink was partly because of the computer age. There's the idea of hardware and software. So if we look classically at, say, MS or Parkinson's disease, there's a hardware problem. There's a problem with the wiring. It just doesn't function properly, or the problem with the transmitters. So there's a problem in the physicality, and that identifies why there's an issue with symptoms. But now that we understand about software, we can have a computer like the one I'm looking at here that is functionally, structurally sound. But if the software is corrupted, badly installed, or there's a virus, then the computer won't work. So that has an effect on how the computer functions, and therefore gives identical symptoms. And this is really important. With functional neurological disorder, the level of disability is exactly the same as somebody with MS or Parkinson's disease or epilepsy. Quality of life is impaired long term, and kind of an additional issue is, for years, people weren't believed. So not only were they physically impaired, but nobody really believed them or knew what to do with them, because how do you give a drug when you can't work out what the process is that needs the medication? If you want to know a bit more about this, then do check out my conversation with the amazing Dr. Sarah Lisdon, who is a specialist in all this. Check out the Mind-Body Connection podcast. She talks about this brilliantly. But let's come back to this software-hardware thing. So the idea was, okay, so we've got hardware problems and we've got software problems, because if the software doesn't work, then you get similar problems as if the hardware is broken. And this opened up a whole new conversation about FND, being, this, we can understand this in a different way. Maybe there's a problem with signal processing. So it's not just these people have got mental health issues. Maybe there's a problem with the way the brain processes those signals. We know that this shows up in all sorts of other areas in people's health. And that opened the door to moving people from this, something wrong with them mentally, to, okay, well, this is a processing issue. And with that, a kind of recognition of, well, maybe we need to approach this differently. This more recent research has moved this conversation on further, because, and this is what Sarah says very interestingly in her conversation with me, maybe it's not that there isn't a physical issue going on. Maybe it's that we just don't yet have the technology to see it. And that as the technology advances in diagnostic imaging, we're starting to see, in certain cases of FMD, that there are structural changes in all sorts of places in the brain, whereas before we went, oh, there's nothing wrong with you. well, actually, the problem was we can't see what's wrong with you. So this opens up a much more kind of apologetic for how it had been dealt with in the past, and a recognition that, kind of independent of whether it's structural, whether it's hardware or software, it doesn't actually really matter. The problem is that people are having really significant life changes, health changes, and how do we help? And that's the question. What do we do to help people who've got this issue, to help them move forwards? Now, one of the first things to do has to be to believe them. And if you listen to a lot of my podcast interviews with people, this is a very common thing that comes up. When your patients, your clients tell you they have something, believe them. Because symptoms are very, very difficult to measure. They are a personal thing. So the best measurement is, do you feel it or not? If somebody is saying, I can't move my leg, or, I'm having these incredible headaches, yeah, well, great, they have. The question then is, okay, what can we do to help you? So this is a real kind of beginning point of functional neurological disorders and diseases. The main thing, as I say, is this conversation has moved on massively from, it's all in your mind because we can't see anything, to, okay, maybe it's a software issue, to, maybe it's a software and hardware issue. So if you know someone who's dealing with this, or if you are someone who is dealing with this, things have moved on. Medicine is starting to see this very differently and thinking about what are the ways that we can help these signals to process better. And interestingly, there are lots of things you can do to start to make the brain process better. So with chronic pain, for instance, I spend a lot of time helping people to retrain their brain to slow down certain pathways and to enhance other ones that are more about health and well-being, to switch on and off neurotransmitters. So there's all sorts of interesting research that can be taken from one field into this field to look for new solutions that might help people who are suffering with this very difficult disease. I hope that's an interesting starting point for anybody watching.